asked me to close out the session today, and I figured what would be a better way to close out the session than to just have me close it out is to bring some folks that have been working closely with Acadiasoft, ask them to join me on it. And really what we want to do is, we've talked a lot today about uncleared margin rules. And I don't know if you want us to talk more about uncleared margin rules, but this session is not about uncleared margin rules in themselves. This session's about where we see the future of collateral heading, and what are the key things, and what are the key changes we expect over the next, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, over the coming years through 2025. Okay, from Acadiasoft's standpoint, I think what we saw earlier today is we're working on a number of initiatives, okay, that are aimed at automation, that are aimed at utilizing centralized information, golden source type information. We're aimed at connecting more and more parties to the service and covering more and more products in our service. We can see a future, okay, where more and more pre-agreed central information is used in the process, not just with agreements, but also with possibly valuations. And in that type of environment, we see a dramatic difference in the cost structures required to operate a collateral operation in the market. Okay, we can see the role of the margin analysts today changing. Okay, we could see it becoming a different type, move from really a processing type focus, okay, to a little bit more of a management, control, and teaching focus, or with the upstream functions that it's dependent upon. So that's just context setting and where the perspective that we're coming from and I'm coming from. Now I'm going to ask some questions for the group here and get some views. Now before I go, why don't we do quick introductions?
Sure. I'm Dominic Falco. I work at BNY Mellon, and I run our collateral segregation business, which covers the UMR regs.
My name is Maurice Taman. I work at Goldman Sachs, and I'm responsible for our collateral liquidity operations teams.
I Lakoff, Industry and Counterparty Management for BlackRock, along with a few other things, and I just kind of have a long history in the collateral space.
All friends, I hope. So to get started, I'll get started with Isla and Dom, the question. Do you think we can get to 100% automation from a margin call perspective? What's stopping us, if anything, from getting there?
Look, we've made tremendous progress, right? We've done this in phases. Be it OTC first is probably about 98%. TBA, repo, cleared product is next. We want to think beyond just the standard, collateral call process. Right? So when we think about automation and getting to 100%, that's from the beginning of the process to the end, meaning settlement and bookkeeping to the ultimate client's books and records. Right? So we've done this for a long time in a very vertical way, and we'll talk about settlements a little bit later, but it's really about getting more horizontal across all of the elements from the initial margin call all the way through to what gets to the client's books and records, and getting that messaging to be real time, right? So that we know where everything is, it's all settled, it's all agreed, and we get a much better mechanic around disputes, resolution, any sort of breaks, right? That's what 100% is really going to mean. We've done really well with the collateral process, but we have a long way to go to get to the full asset servicing sort of level that we need to get to.
Thank you.
Yep.
Don?
I think within BNY Mellon, we probably look at it from two different perspectives. Obviously, we look at it from being the custodian and being on one end of the transaction, but in addition, through our middle office and our collateral administration services, we're actually the back office of the client. And so much like ILO, within that particular service, we've done a lot of work in terms of automation straight through from the process of calculating the margin call, alleging it up into the margin sphere, matching, and sending out through SWIFT. So, in effect, we've done a great deal of work in that perspective. I think one of the additional pieces that we now focus on, and I'll mention that that automation has gone completely exception processing, I would say, in the cache space. One other additional piece that we need to add into that and layer into it is the non-cache space, where we next have to layer our tri-party technology, for lack of a better word, into figuring out what is the cheapest to deliver under the collateral schedules. So, I think we've made a great deal of progress there. I think when we get down to the actual settlement piece, and Isla, I know you and I had a quick conversation around this earlier, that's really the bottleneck. And frankly, we live in an interesting spot because we're both one side of that bottleneck and also the other side of the bottleneck in some cases.
Thank you. Thank you. Maurice, on this particular question, I mean, one part of the question also was, what do you see that may be stopping us? What do you think it might be the big hurdle out there?
Right, so it's interesting. When we talk about 100% automation, I think we got to be quite specific of what we mean. So the first thing is, we could say 100% through channels that support automation, which is an important point. And then the next question is, what happens after that? And we have issues, we have breaks, we have differences in our balances, we have fails. And we have, and ultimately, the way the industry operates right now is like, we do a trade, it gets polluted in your pipe, it gets polluted in my pipe, and then we try and match it together. And the point we're going to get to is we're going to create a lot of efficiencies by improving just the transfer of data from ourselves to our counterpart, but the reality, the data that we transferred between counterparts have gone through that pollution process in there. So I think that is the biggest thing that is preventing us right now after the automation of the communication. It's how do we eliminate that pollution of data between parties on a trade. And I think that we're starting to see some really interesting discussions happening in the market around agreement manager. Perfect example, just to plug it for you. It's my pleasure. Where we're going to eliminate subjectivity of collateral terms. There are other products that have been developed out there to eliminate that subjectivity on trade, eliminate subjectivity on settlement. And once you have that, you really do get to a place where you really can be pure STP, where you really can start redefining what our people do and how they think about their jobs. But unfortunately, I think we've still got a way to go. But I think that's the mindset we need to be thinking about.
All right, thank you. Now I guess the question, I'll start with you, Isla, here, okay? If we could get to 100% automation, and if we could deal with the anti-pollution, how does that impact collateral staffs from your standpoint?
We spend a lot of time sort of re-engineering our operating model on a regular basis. And one of the things we're spending a tremendous amount of time talking about right now is the whole service organization and how we ultimately see operations turning into much more of a service org. So I do a lot of, say, presentations in front of clients around our operational model and due diligence in front of clients, how we operate, how we do things, et cetera. We are getting our operations folks trained in things like RPA and hiring more and more staff that are technologically savvy to move us in the right direction. We're getting much closer to our trading teams because the complexity of what's going on in the derivative world, things aren't getting simpler, they're getting more complicated. And we have to provide more unique solutions for different clients with different investment type mandates. So I think as collateral practitioners become less processors and more sort of data analytical, get closer and closer to being part of the business process and the overall value proposition that we offer as a firm.
Thank you. Dom?
Yeah, I'd concur with what Isla said. I mean, if we look at a couple of things, I mean, at its most basic level, we really don't call our operations team operations, we call it client service delivery. So we take a slightly different approach, and hopefully that resonates very well with the clients. if I think back to, for example, the creation of the various collateral schedules that were required under UMR, our teams actually were, of course, helping to try and translate what the regulations meant and try and translate those into templates. And in fact, working in a more consultative basis with the clients to help figure out, number one, how to translate real words into bony speak, because that's its own little nightmare. But in addition, trying to help them, understand how to construct their collateral schedules so that they would be able to comply with the multitude of different types of regulations and the cross-border aspects of it. Alan, I think, what do we say? We've got like 56 different varieties of, okay, more than 56, and when it gets to 100, we'll sell. But effectively, we've worked pretty much with the clients and with the industry to try and understand the regs, digest the regs, and I think as we go more to automation, it's really those folks that know how to touch and feel the day-to-day business that will actually become the future product and client-facing individuals in the relationship team and become much, much more consultative with the clients. Much like I was saying in terms of dealing with the traders and portfolio managers.
Yeah, so if I were to put that together, I'd say much more client-focused,
Sure.
industry expert, technical, technical.
Yeah, technical advisor to the client and really help to kind of bring the business in the door with the background of what it means to actually be on the other side of the phone.
Maurice, anything to add?
No, I think that.
I'd just make one more comment. When clients come into us, they're coming in and wanting multiple products, right? So when we talk about service, it's not just about derivatives. It's not just about cash products. It's about everything. Whether it's what assets to use from a collateral perspective, how do we make sure that our traders are seeing the right data in real time, right? So it's all about data, data, data. And firms like AcadiaSoft provide an incredibly valuable service. I mean, it took Chris and I 5 years to actually sort of tie the knot, but now that we're looking to expand using Acadia everywhere we can. So there's not only the existing products that they support today, but anywhere collateralization is in use. So if it's with ETFs and the APs and redemptions and different things, whether it's sec lending and anywhere else that we can basically use any sort of collateral type arrangement, ultimately we see, because of the network that Acadia has built, that's really what's going to get us that standardization and market standard practice for everybody that benefits all of us.
Interesting, interesting. So you can see a situation where we can use the bandwidth we're creating an automation to start going multi-product and tear down the silos that might exist in the industry largely. And a lot of those silos are, what we experience, are more on the sell side, which have the high scale, higher operations.
Yeah.
You have any thoughts on that, Maurice?
Yeah, I was going to add to that, which I completely agree with what both of you say, but the ability to leverage standard data that comes into us through automation and automatic pipes has enabled us to use that data to perform some quite sophisticated analysis to improve service to our clients as well, and look at what potential products we can be offering them also. So and that was very much mentioned in the agreement management discussion as well, the ability to leverage that data and not have to mine it and understand it and redefine it every single time you want to answer a question or find a new answer. So for example, what we're doing now, we invest a lot in understanding the patterns and behaviors in that data that comes in to see where we can improve things for our clients also, or improve our risk profiles. So that is another profile that we see as a result of this automation, because you are able to look at patterns and actually tweak your behaviors on the basis of those patterns as well.
All right. All right. Now, I guess I'm going to come back to one of your points you made, Maurice, which was, I called the pollution point. Right? The idea that we can automate as much as we want, okay, but if we don't solve the fact that we're doing things differently from one another, so differently from one another, are we going to get the level of efficiency that we want out of it? Kind of that conversation around, should we move towards more of a dispute avoidance model, doing things such as looking for a central valuation? Do you have any thoughts, and do you see that happening as being an emerging topic?
I think when we talk about central valuation, sometimes people look at it as like a utopia across all products, across all businesses. And the reality is some businesses are not suitable for central valuation. And all you need to do is look back at 2008, which all us older people remember, where there was some major disconnect in the market around prices of certain asset classes. And some firms were going at those and blessing them. Some firms were not. Disputes were all over the shop. Risk in the system was ridiculous. And the firms that didn't rely so much on those market values, those central market values, and manage their risks themselves and assess their risks themselves, I think fared slightly better than the ones that didn't. So I think the question is, when you talk about it, yes, I think it absolutely will improve our dispute processes and enable us to get to a place where we don't have to agree, or we can get to a place of agreeing marks between our parties for certain product types. But I think there is a limit you can go to. It's a bit like clearing. There's only so far you can go. And there's no reason why you can't say in a portfolio your counterpart that we'll use this valuation agent for this product type, that valuation agent for the other product type, and these ones will maintain subjectivity. I think that's absolutely fine, because that is probably the best way to risk manage those products. We can ultimately aim to go all the way, but there will be a number of other questions we need to ask around the suitability and the control of those values that we leverage.
Yeah, I mean, for us as a fiduciary, that'd be a little tricky. We'd have to go through our valuation committees, our pricing committees, our risk committees. I think there's a role that a central valuation function can play, where we could have the dealer's mark, our mark, and say the third-party agent, right? And in a fair weather market where everything's kind of rational, if what comes out from the valuation platform is somewhere in between the two, we can agree to use the number in the middle. It's kind of like the split the difference rationale we used to use before we had any technology, right? Back in the day, for those of us that have been doing this for like 20 years. I think, to Maurice's point, when you get to a Lehman type scenario, it's going to be very difficult, right? Especially as a fiduciary, we have a responsibility. We have our own risk analytics and controls that we have to comply with. So that would make it a bit more difficult. And if it could get to clearing, it would already probably be cleared, right? So there's always going to be that 80-20 rule of what we can clear and what we can't.
Yeah. So split the difference, or that type of a rule potentially, but with a tolerance.
Yeah, and an ability to dispute it, if you feel strongly,
Yeah.
if you're completely against it.
So it's almost like, the concept of exception processing and getting the exceptions down to a smaller universe, right? So to Maurice's point, if we can rely on some valuation agent for, say, more common types of assets, that might be the easier way. We may use potentially that valuation as a benchmark across, disputes, or potentially for sanity check. I mean, oftentimes we see clients will come to us for valuation services, not because they want to use it, but they simply want to sanity check the valuations they themselves are actually putting on a particular instrument. So these kind of things will help us. I think where we go, it's I'd call them, and again, this is an Alan Lewis SAT word, stratactical. It's a directional move, but effectively it's one that will help to get us down the path to full automation.
There's some things though we can do as an interim step, right? We can agree snap times. We could agree sources for FX rates. There are other things that we can do in the interim to get us to a better place. And that sort of standard market practice, I think, is something that we can do that we don't need technology for, but we have to get agreement on what those things are.
That's a good point. Okay, I'm going to move to the next question here, and I'm going to start with Dom on this one. What changes or improvements do you foresee on the settlement side?
Well, I think, and again, this is something that Isla and I will hotly contest. I think the automation on the custodian side is key, and we're looking at a number of different ways to get closer to real-time settlement information. Effectively, I think the one thing, if we were going to be, President Kennedy back in whatever 1960 or what it was, and said, by 1970 we're going to put a man on the moon. Like maybe by 2025, let's say that we're going to put faxes out of business. That would, unfortunately, that would mean that, probably 25% of most banks' staff would have to be gone. But the reality is that would be, I would say, the first thing that we need to try and do.
So how do we do that?
So this is a personal
Unplug the machine.
pet peeve. Today, I'm unbelievably frustrated, and Dom knows this, across all the custodians. If the wire's up, settle the trade. I think I said this in the last time I sat in this panel for Acadia Soft. Look, these guys have been tremendous partners, and there's a lot that we can do. But if we don't ultimately get to the point where the client's books and records are properly reflected real time, we're never going to get to that level of automation. We talk about DLT and alternative technologies and smart contracts and getting the agreements right and everything else, but we have to fix the plumbing. And the custodian end game is a big part of the plumbing that needs to be innovated, right? They have to come with us. I'm not picking on them. It's just that innovation has to become, real time for them. And even today, I dispute the fact that if we're sending things electronically, yeah, there are still some faxes and there are gaps, no doubt. And probably our Swift messages and everybody else's in the room could be better than they are today. But at the end of the day, if I'm sending an electronic message and the wire's up, settle the trade. I don't want to hear about arbitrary cutoffs. I don't want to hear about anything else. The wire's up, settle it, period. And get it booked to the right end account. Don't just tell me that it's settled and give me a settlement message. But I've got thousands of accounts. I trade in a block and then I allocate. I got to know that on the at the end of the allocation that the client's account has been, properly reflected.
Maurice.
Take us out of this rabbit hole, Maurice, please.
So, from a dealer's perspective, how do you finally kill the fax on a tri-party
We've
release?
been begging to get rid of the fax for a long time, and I think you've been pretty good at it, by the way. But,
We try.
yeah, but I think to be honest, I completely agree with you. There's going to be a point. We're going through this sort of digital revolution and everything that we're doing right now. We're talking about agreements. We're talking about transactions. The DLT is being discussed in many areas. And those provide material benefits way beyond just processing. To be honest, the organizations that do not move forward will be out of business very soon because it's going to cost their clients more money to be in business, not just from an operational perspective, but from a liquidity perspective, in the future if their custodians or their agents don't move forward. And I think it's moving pretty quickly now. It's really interesting. Like we talk about the basics around getting rid of fax, etc. But one thing I can see is that the innovation that's coming from a number of new companies that are out there just coming up with new ideas about how to do settlements and manage settlements are completely rethinking it as well. And I think all right, some of these will fail, some of these will succeed, but look forward 5, 6, 7 years. I think how we interface with a custodian or how we even think what a custodian is will completely change. And again, if you're still operating on a basis, you've got someone taking a fax and typing it in to some old green screen and then manually typing it in a Swift.
Signing it and sending
it
back.
all this sort of stuff. They're out of business. It's that simple. So I think the market will talk with their feet and their wallets in the future.
Yeah. I would love to see that fax in the tri-party release done by next year.
Wait, let's be clear. Third-party release.
Third-party release, you're right.
Yeah.
All right.